I want to talk about the 50s. This is an interesting one. I think, I've been very transparent about it as I've transitioned into this decade. It's not an easy one. Your mortality becomes very apparent to you. You think about look. I feel like I've done a life well lived. So I'm celebrating the decisions I've made, but I'm also recognizing, man, it might not always be like this. I can't take my health for granted. I can't take that I'm always going to be able to do memory building like I have. So I think it's okay to be sentimental. We talk about there's get wealthy behaviors, there's stay wealthy behaviors. This is hopefully the decade where you are focusing on the stay wealthy, but that's unfortunately not what we're seeing with the average American.
Yeah, when we look at the average American, they have a very different mindset than what Brian just described. The average American in their 50s has no plan for retirement, and because they have no plan, they don't want to think about it. And somehow, it's almost like ignorance is bliss. That does not help. If you actually look at the numbers, the median household age 55 to 64 right now has $185,000 saved in retirement accounts. Well, if you just assume the 4% safe withdrawal rate rule, that $185,000 will only generate about $7,400 per year in retirement. It is going to be hard to truly be financially independent at that level of savings. So you need to understand where you are and do you have a plan in place. But unfortunately, most folks in their 50s don't want to think about it. Out of sight, out of mind, I'll deal with it later.
Well, I don't want people to try as we call it, the Hail Mary approaches, where you're like really desperate, you're behind, and so you start making those desperate decisions and investing in dumb doctor deals or other things that are so out on the speculative investment spectrum that you really run a high chance of just putting your financial life in the ditch.
And then the other thing that the average American has done is their financial behavior has not matured. When you are a young financial person, it's okay if you're making young financial person mistakes and you might have a debt issue. You might learn about debt for the first time. By the time you get to your 50s, debt should no longer be a struggle. You have had a lifetime to figure out, hey, this stuff is not good for me. This stuff does not help me. This stuff can hurt me. But the average American still struggles with it. They still have the credit card debt. They still have the car loans. They have the student loans. They have not recognized that debt is detrimental long-term, and they've not mastered that very basic financial mutant skill.
Yeah, I'll be a little harsh with this. I think if you're in your 50s and you're not paying cash for vehicles, what are you doing? I mean, seriously, if you're having... because I think the problem, people think time on the planet has now put them in this position where, hey, I had my season where I was driving the Toyota Corolla. I want a nice car. Yeah. No, if you don't have the money in the bank, if you can't pay cash for the vehicle, then don't make those financial napalm decisions that are going to continue to work against you. Because if you think it's bad while you're in the 50s and you still have some years ahead of you that you can save and invest, it's going to be really, really tough as you enter retirement where your ability to work and pay for expenses with labor is going to slowly start going away. Yep. I hate to be harsh like that, but it is. True. You've got to have something that bridges the gap, and that's where hopefully if you've been saving and investing, it can be the gap filler to actually work for you. Your army of dollar bills should be working harder than you can, but people get in a lot of trouble.
But you said, Brian, in the 50s, it's been different for you. There is a millionaire mindset, a mutant mindset you can have. So if you have been doing the things that you're supposed to be doing and you're in the place you should be, if you want to have the millionaire behavior in your 50s, you're now preparing to land the retirement plane. You're now beginning to get your head wrapped around, okay, I have a plan and I may not quite be there yet, but I can see the runway. And I understand the things that I need to be doing right now to prepare for that soft landing to make sure this next stage, this next transition is smooth.
Yeah, and I think what you can hopefully, if you were taking the relationship to the next level, because you are getting to that point where you've only had, this is going to be your first retirement. And you don't want to be green behind the ears and make some rookie mistakes or have a blind spot on something you just weren't prepared for. So this probably is the stage where you'll consider taking the relationship to the next level and working with us. Yep. And here's what a financial advisor can hopefully help you work through is not only the stress test to tell you how well is that plane
Is it
going to
actually
land.
gonna
Is
work?
it easy? Is this thing going to fall apart as it approaches land, or is it actually going to hold up and land well? And then beyond, is it going to go to a hangar that you actually like the life that you're living after you do leave retirement? So you got stress testing. I always think a good financial planner is also going to help you, because you're going to have the three pots of money. You're going to have your after tax, your pre-tax, and you're going to have your tax free. How do you get some of those tax-deferred assets into Roth assets? You go do a Roth conversion strategy. I think people are always shocked when they find out that every year there's going to be a test on your Social Security income, on your Medicare income. Medicare premiums are going to be determined by what your income was last year. And somebody needs to help you navigate all of that, as well as trying to balance how much in the three pots of money. There's all kind of maximization strategies. And like I said, you're going to be learning about all this. I don't want you to have that knowledge come to you and where you're trying to learn on the fly and miss an opportunity that if you'd have just paid somebody to help you maximize this opportunity, it'd have been so much less stress, as well as you to maximize the opportunity and been the better version of yourself financially.
I love what you said there. It's this realization that in my financial life, in my 50s, I've now graduated beyond the basics. I'm not trying to answer the basic questions around budgeting. How do I live on less than I make? I'm now thinking about the higher order stuff. Okay, what does Medicare look like? What does Social Security look like? Where will my money come from? What will my tax situation look like? How do I make sure I'm insured? Am I in the later steps of the financial order of operations? Am I prepaying for future expenses? Am I starting to become debt free? You recognize that there are other higher level items that are now commanding your attention, not how do I make the ends meet? How do I go from this last paycheck to my next paycheck? Once you're at this stage of life, you should be beyond those basic financial levels.
Well, and also think about commercial airplanes. They require two pilots. Because they don't want you, you have a heart attack in the middle of the air. If you're your own private aviation company, you're flying your own private plane. If you have a heart attack, you're at peril. But when you have a commercial plane, you've got a whole group of people. And I think a lot of us in our financial life, we have a whole group of people, especially if you're the financial mutant, that is looking at your life. And it might be your significant, your spouse. It might be the kids. There's a lot of obligations out there. Have a co-pilot on that part of it. I think that is a big part. And then also knowing what you can and can't do. A lot of people, I think they don't realize, you go through your entire career being disciplined on living on less than you make and being rewarded for saving and investing. And then when you leave the workforce, now you're supposed to start consuming these assets. That's not the easiest transition. If you've been doing something for 30 or 40 years and now somebody says, hey, you got enough money, go spend. You're like, no, I'm tight. And I'm like, no, go spend some of this money. It's nice to have somebody to be there to say, yes, I can show you the plan, show you why it's okay to start consuming what you have spent decades building. And then also like that we're the backup plan. I mean, do you know how many of you financial mutants, you are brilliant with your financial life, but your significant other, because you've done such a good job, they're not keeping up with it. You might be doing the net worth meeting with them every year, but they're not paying attention. And what happens when you can't speak? And you're like, oh my gosh, this wonderful world of finance that I've built all these resources with, there's a lot of crooks out there. There's a lot of snakes in the grass. How do I have a backup plan? That's what I want you to think about. You've got to have a plan. And here's what we have realized when you look at the research. 97% of retirees who wake up with a strong sense of purpose, they're happier than their peers. So why not navigate that so you are living your best life, not just building up assets so you reach the number goal without having the mindset tied into the purpose and your why all intersecting at the right point.
I love it. The 20s, 30s, 40s was so quantitative. It was so much about the numbers. As you get in your 50s, it is quantitative. But as you think about this next endeavor, as you think about the next stage, it is qualitative. It's a lot of those softer thoughts, those softer discussions. Okay, what is this next phase and stage of my life going to look like? And the more clarity you have around that, the more likely you are to set yourself up for success. So let's look at the numbers. If you are 50 years old, and you have been saving and you've built up some level of wealth, if you've built up $351,000, you're already on pace to be a millionaire by the time that you get to age 65. By 55, if your goal is to be a millionaire, you need to have at least $522,000 saved up. And by the time you get to the end of your 50s, by the time you get on the cusp of that 60-year-old time frame, You need to have almost $700,000 if you want to be a millionaire. But by this stage, your goal should no longer be, hey, I just want to be a millionaire. I just want to be a millionaire. You should know your number. You should know what number is what you need to achieve to be able to live the life that you want to live on your terms. And in your 50s, you should be making concrete steps towards that goal, and the finish line ought to be in sight so that you can make sure you finish the drill well.
Yeah, I think hopefully a lot of you, if you're watching the older, seeing if you're in your 30s and saying, hey, what do I need to be thinking about 50 and beyond? You go out there, you see these numbers, and hopefully it's going to be a reward on your sacrifice and your discipline in the past. But go check out the resource we have. Are You on Track to Be a Millionaire? Moneyguy.com/resources.